I wanna be a producer with a hit show on Broadway. I wanna be a producer.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Producer's Perspective podcast. So today I'm thrilled to be sitting down with someone who is the head of one of the oldest companies in the theater business. Please welcome to the podcast the executive director of Samuel French, Mr. Bruce Lazarus. Welcome, Bruce.
Hi. Hey, Ken. How are you?
So Bruce has done a ton of things in the biz. He's an entertainment attorney, he's been a producer, and now he's the head of this incredible, important machine in our industry. You know, we sometimes forget that while a lot of stuff goes on here, so much of the theater business actually happens outside the gates of New York City. So, Bruce, most people know Samuel French from having done a community theater production or a high school production. But in your own words, tell us what Samuel French is and what it does.
Well, Samuel French is the oldest and largest publisher and licensor of stage plays and musicals. It was founded in 1830 by a man named Samuel French, who came up with this idea that not only could he publish the plays that had therefore been scattered around, there were other publishers, but the idea that actually he could provide them to people outside of the metropolitan areas who had no access to the theater other than a tour coming by with Edwin Booth or somebody, and that was usually Shakespeare. And so he not only published them, but he licensed them and collected money on behalf of the authors, which before then, the copyright law was a little unclear in the United States and in the UK, and he was an advocate for the rights of authors to actually be able to license their play, maintain their copyright, and make a living at it.
So how did you land up at the big desk?
Oh wow, that's an interesting question. I started out as an actor, and I became an agent, and then I became a manager. I used to manage Ray Liotta and David Caruso and Troy Beyer and Scatman Crothers and Philip Baker Hall, Dangerous Men and Beautiful Women. And I was going to law school at night, and I couldn't find an agency job that would let me leave at 5 o'clock to make class. So I opened a management firm, and as ordinary as I was as an agent, I was pretty good as a manager. And along the way, actually, when I first came, I went to Los Angeles to be an actor. When I first decided to become an actor, I figured, I am not going to wait for someone to discover me. I am going to find a play and produce a play. And I hate to tell you that I learned everything I needed to from Option to Opening by Donald Farber.
It's a great book.
It's a great book.
I read that book. Most people that are producers now have read a Farber book at one point or another.
And I went right out of the book and I produced my first play, really for me to star in. But I had so much fun, I guess, really. I mean, I was so into producing it that I let someone else be in the play. And then I got into producing and I abandoned my acting career. Although I must tell you that I was once on The Gong Show.
Did you get gonged?
I did not get gonged, but I did not win. But I made more money. I did several things as an actor, but I made more money off The Gong Show than anything else because it repeated and repeated and repeated. Anyway, I decided to produce this play that came across my desk called Only Kidding. I was in LA, and I was managing David Caruso and had a part for him. And I did an enhanced production at the American Jewish Theater in New York. And he didn't come out for that, but then he came out to see it and he went, "Oh, this is funny. I thought you were going to do it much darker," and decided that he didn't want to do it. But we got a rave review by Frank Rich. We moved it uptown to the West Side Arts, where it ran for almost a year. And my lawyer on that show was Albert De Silva, who is one of the grand masters of theatrical law. He represented Neil Simon and Cy Coleman and Lloyd Richards, and he took me under his wing. By that time, I had passed the bar, and taught me the business. And I sat in his office for a year, and one day he said to me, "You got to find some of your own clients because you can't make a living off of my clients." So my assistant at the time was Amy Stoller, who's Mike Stoller's daughter. And she came to me and she said, I know these guys, they have this sort of weird show, but they're looking for a lawyer. And I was looking for a client. I said, great, I'll see them. And they came in and they described this show to me, and I had no idea what they were talking about. None. But they paid me a nice legal retainer, and I said, okay, I'm your lawyer. And then I went to the Soho rep, and I saw a little piece of something that I had no idea what it was. And then I went to La Mama, and they did another little piece. And then they invited me to Serious Fun at Lincoln Center, where they did the whole show together. And I went, oh, I get it. It was a little show called Blue Man Group. And that was my first show as an attorney. And I worked that show for a long time. And interestingly enough, at some point, Disney had called and wanted to make a movie out of Blue Man, which never happened. But I started to negotiate the deal with a film lawyer at Disney. And a few years later, Disney had produced Beauty and the Beast, all with outside counsel, and decided that they were going to get into the theatrical business with The Lion King, and decided to start a theatrical department. And she remembered me. She called me through a series of interviews, as you know how that goes. I eventually became the director of business affairs for Disney Theatrical. And I worked on The Lion King and the international tours of Beauty and the Beast and Aida, and development on some of the other projects that have now come to Broadway. And then did that for a couple of years and went into private practice, opened a few businesses, tried a few different things. And I got friendly with a gentleman at, this is your story. I forgot about this part. So I was interested in doing something. I was living in Florida, and I was interested in looking at a couple of plays, and I was at Samuel French, and they suggested I look at this play called My First Time.
That's an amazing show, I've heard.
It's unbelievable. And I licensed it from Samuel French and produced it in Florida, and did fairly well with it. And then I also went to see Awesome 80s Prom of yours, which, by the way, I just have to say, I tell this story all the time because the model you had for that, I thought was genius. How you got the club to basically give you the club for free because you left them with 100 girls drinking when you closed the show and they started their disco. And it was just, I thought, a brilliant way to mount the show. And in fact, now at Samuel French, I tell people that story all the time because I want them to do Awesome 80s Prom in a bar, just the way you did. But nevertheless, in the course of doing that, the head of Samuel French was let go. And I had sort of gotten a little friendly with him. And where'd he go? What happened? I got no answers. And I was always fascinated with the Samuel French model because I always loved music publishing. And it was like music publishing, except it was theater, which was my true love. So here it was like music publishing for theater. Oh, great, copyrights. Just my thing. I interviewed a few times with their search committee, and I didn't get the job. A fellow named Nate Collins, who is one of the as part of one of the three families that own Samuel French, took the position of CEO, and then invited me a year later to come in and work with him, and that was the best thing that ever happened because he is, he's our corporate president and he has a great head for business. He's developed this love for the theater and he's great at building teams. And that's what Samuel French has really become. It's all about teamwork and a passion for theater. And so I came in and started to run the licensing department and the marketing department and the acquisitions department and basically the forward-facing front of Samuel French. And I've been there now for over 3 years. I tell people it's my dream job Because it is. It's the culmination of all of my talents and interests and experience and whatever little wisdom I've picked up along the way. I get to tell all my stories. It's great.
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking about, you're perfectly suited for this. You've got an administrative and a law degree, and you can deal with all the copyrights. And then you start telling me about pitching the Awesome 80s Prom, which thank you very much, by the way. But there seems to be a combination of both the legal aspect and the marketing aspect in what you do. How much of your, what's a typical day for you? What's it most spent on as the head of a company like Samuel French? What do you find yourself doing the most?
Well, I'm also, I also do all of our business affairs. And one of the things I was able to do when I got to Samuel French was, the business affairs of the company had not been in good shape. We were using a contract from, I don't know when, from the 1950s. Through much resistance with the big agents in town, I was able to dump our little 4-page contract, and basically now we operate with maybe a 23-page contract that really covers all of the bases and makes it clear, and there's a lot less room for ambiguity. But having done that, I think we were able to go from being the old dusty and musty Samuel French to being a real player in the business, which is what we are today. So when you ask me what I spend my day on, I spend my day on acquisitions and the contracts that go around those acquisitions. I oversee our marketing department. I oversee, as I mentioned before, our editorial department. The thing that has really, I think, changed at Samuel French is that we've really become artist focused. It's really about the playwright. Everything we do centers around the playwright. And at the end of the day, does it all end up in increased licenses, which also is about the playwright? Yes. But all of our marketing initiatives, all of the pieces we choose to represent, all of our licensing efforts. We have a very proactive licensing team. We've by the way, we have 50 people who work in New York. I believe we're the largest of any of the people in our business. We have 50 people in New York. We have another 18 in London and another almost 10 in Los Angeles. And our licensing team is double what it is when I got there. And we've put people into pods so that instead of someone now that used to represent amateur rights in 5 states now handles high school. I have 2 people that just do high schools anywhere in the world. People that do theaters for a young audience, people that are focused on the college market, people that are focused on professional. We have the largest professional team of anybody. We have 6 people, and they are focused on professional licensing. So we've drilled down so that we have an expertise in those areas as opposed to just being a geographical thing.
So you mentioned acquisitions being a key part of what you do every day. Is this statement true when it comes to licensing and for you deciding whether or not you're going to acquire something? The more success the show has on Broadway, the more successful the licensing will be. Is that statement true?
For the most part, it's true. I mean, there's more awareness of it. There's more interest in it. It takes less effort to get people to know what the show is about. Of course, there are a lot of things about a show that make it more licensable or less licensable. If it's a show with a cast of 28 men, it's a little harder to license in the amateur market where you have lots of, schools with predominantly women cast. So it depends on a lot of factors, but for the most part, from a marketing standpoint, sure. If it's had some heat on Broadway, off Broadway in a regional market, certainly if it's won the Pulitzer or the Tony Award, makes it a lot easier.
So what are some of those other factors that when you're looking at a show are on your checklist to decide, yes, this is something we should acquire, or no, this is something we should pass on?
Well, let me first say that we are committed to our writers. If we're already publishing a writer, we're more likely to pick up their other work, whether it's commercial or not. But, now that I say that, whether it's commercial or not, we're really focused on the art of theater. I mean, do we have a calculation as to what we'll pay as an advance based on what we think the show will do? Sure, we do. But we're really interested in fostering the great American play. So, we're picking up artists like Will Eno and Susan Laurie Parks or Jennifer Haley, who's got this great play called The Nether, or Bathsheba Duran with The Mystery of Love and Sex. These are not necessarily the most commercial plays, but they're the plays that interest us and that our team is passionate about. We have a really deep team. Everyone on our team is a theater professional. Everyone has come out of a theater school. Before they get a job, they have to do a PowerPoint presentation for us on how they would sell several of our shows into various different markets. We drill them pretty hard. We take the creme de la creme of available people out there, and then we train them. They're reading all the time. They're reading everything new that we're picking up. They're reading the classics, so that they can articulate what we do. We want to make sure that our playwrights, you're a playwright, playwrights are an amazing group of people. They stare at a blank page and they create something out of nothing. Everybody else in the theater, I love actors, I love directors, I love designers. They are creating derivative works of the play. Without the play, there is nothing. And so we want to make sure that this play that has maybe taken a year or two to write, this is this playwright's baby. We want to make sure that we give it a nice, long, healthy life after it has a run in New York or regionally or on Broadway, knock wood. But so I think therein lies the difference.
How often do you pick up shows that don't have a New York life?
Again, it depends. If it's a writer that we're working with, we'll pick up a show whether it's come to New York or not. If it's a new writer, I think we have to look long and hard if we can do it justice. We don't want to pick it up just to pick it up. 3 years ago when I got there, we were picking up 140 or 160 plays a year. Now we're picking up more like 40, maybe another 20 that are, our OOB winners. We do the off-Broadway festival. There are another 20 in there that we also pick up, but a much smaller group of plays because we want to pay attention to it. We want to really give it its best shot. So
that's something actually I can tell you from the outside that I've even noticed. It used to be back in the day when I was looking to produce something, I would just pick up the Samuel French catalog and flip through something. And it was like the fattest, biggest catalog you could imagine over all your competitors. And it seemed to be that was the goal. We just want everything. But I've noticed, and I think it's a very smart approach that you're taking, which is just to cater to those people that you have and acquire new, of course, but being a little more selective. And of course, being a writer that's in your catalog, I appreciate that very much.
It's also big in fact because we've been around since 1830. Now, not all of those plays are still in copyright, but we have a lot of material.
So, if you've heard of Pareto's principle or the 80-20 rule, which says that 80% of your effects come from 20% of the causes, or 80% of your sales come from 20% of your clients.
It works on everything.
Everything, right? Where are all your sales coming from? Where are the 80% of your sales coming? Do you have this? Does it apply to Samuel French? Is it Broadway delivers the most? Is it regional? Is it community theater? Is it high school?
You're talking about licensing or where the plays are coming from?
Licensing.
Actually, it's pretty much a 50-50 split between professional and amateur. So not so much the 80-20, but there are probably 10% of the plays generating 80% of the income. If
all of a sudden the families that own Samuel French, it sounds very mafia, Godfather-like, by the way, which I love. If they came to you and said, Bruce, you have a choice. We're changing our business model. You can only serve one market? Regional, summer stock, community theater, high school. Which market would you serve to make the families the most money?
So you're asking me a financial question, not necessarily an artistic question.
Correct.
I would say probably the amateur market, because the amateur market takes less effort in the licensing. You would need less staff to actually run a complete amateur department.
And when you say amateur, you mean community theater or high school, both?
Yeah, both.
Both?
Yeah.
What if it was community theater or high school? Which one?
I don't know. I have to think about it. I actually have to look at the numbers. They'd be pretty close.
Well, we'll get back to you on that.
Okay,
we'll let everybody know. Bruce will do some research on that one.
Okay.
So Broadway is obviously exploding. We're seeing higher grosses than we've ever seen before. We're seeing attendance go up, go down, a little go up. We've got telecasts of shows going on.
What do you mean? I thought Broadway is booming, right? Every year we're doing a higher gross, but a lower attendance.
It goes up, it goes down. It's kind of flat.
I just want to say, I read your blog. I know this thing. I know these things.
And we're seeing these great telecasts. Are you seeing this trickle down? Is the subsidiary market, the amateur market, are you getting more licenses now than you did 10 years ago? As a result, does it trickle down licensing, if you will?
I'm sorry. What is trickling down? Because there's more.
Because Broadway is booming so much.
Yes.
Are you seeing a boom in the subsidiary market as well?
I think so. I think there's a boom because Broadway has done an amazing job at branding. Broadway is now in every town, that has a performing arts center. It's Broadway. So yeah, I think so. But that also in some ways narrows the market because people want to do the Broadway, the hits from Broadway. And maybe shows that didn't get to Broadway have a harder time. Off-Broadway shows in our market have a harder time than a Broadway show. Doesn't make them a better show, just makes, sometimes the economics for Broadway and off-Broadway are different. But I must tell you that, and I don't know that it's related to the interest in the theater or Broadway, but I think that we've gotten better at marketing shows and licensing shows. We've seen a over 20% increase year over year over the last 3 years in professional licensing, and a high single digit year over year for the last 3 years in amateur licenses. So we're certainly doing something right. I'd like to think it's our efforts and not just the business. But I'll tell you something. I don't know why it's a little off topic, but I'm reminded of it. I have 2 teenage sons, and when they were young, I asked them, would they rather play a video game or would they rather see the movie that the video game is based on? And they said they'd rather play the video game. And I said, why? And they didn't say this exactly, but basically the message was, in the video game, they get to be the hero, and in the movie, they just get to watch the hero. And when I got to Samuel French, I thought, all of these video games is building this vast audience of people that want to participate. They want to be in the game. And so that's what we do. We allow people to put on a show and be the character. They're in the game. They're playing the role. And so I think all of this video game, coupled with Glee and coupled with all this interest in performing in High School Musical, all of that I think has helped garner even more interest in being on stage, being in the theater, inviting your friends to come and watch you do it. So anyway, a little off topic.
No, I'm a big believer that video games are going to actually revolutionize the way theater is presented. That generation is going to demand a different type of entertainment when they go to the theater, for sure. And speaking of video games, let's talk technology for a bit. When I was licensing or performing in shows repped by Samuel French back in the day, I get the script, I have a piece of paper, a eraser, make sure you erase everything before you submit it, send it back. Like, it was just, that's all you got. Tell me about how technology is changing the business of licensing.
Well, Ken, let me tell you, we are in the technology business in a big way, and really in a way that no one else in our industry is doing. So let me tell you about a number of things we have. One is we just started our digital subscription reader called Abbott that allows you to access basically almost all of the plays in the Samuel French catalog on your phone, your iPad, your computer. It's a web app, and it is brilliant. You can buy a play, you can rent a play. As an initiative, we make that available to artistic directors to peruse, and we also make it available to all Dramatists Guild members, because we are a firm believer that playwrights need to stand on the shoulders of those that came before them in order to learn their craft. And, you can't exactly go to the library and get plays. I mean, you can get the classics, but you can't get plays. And it's very expensive to buy plays, even to rent plays. So we make the Abbott Reader available for free at no charge to Dramatists Guild members. And we still pay the royalty on the read to the author. So we're not asking the authors to finance other people to read their shows. We cover the royalty every time someone reads it, even if they haven't paid for it. So we have our Abbott Reader. I was just showing you before, we have this new thing called an enhanced e-play, which is a multimedia e-play that has video and audio, sound effects, a dialogue coach, a director who's giving you notes, descriptions of what the world of the play and what's going on in it. And at the end, this is Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, the toy soldiers that all break. There's 10 of them that break in every performance. We give you a link to print 3D digital soldiers at any Home Depot or Lowe's.
It's like a play in a box you're giving it. It's like a play on an iPad. It pops up.
It does. But we're doing a lot of other things digitally. We've just started going into the vocal selection and sheet music business. So our first few that are out are Hands on a Hard Body Vocal Selection. We have Natasha Pierre, which is coming to Broadway this year, the vocal selections. We have Fun Home, which is about to be delivered, the final on that. We're also delivering sheet music for Fun Home and Heathers. We also have a vocal selection book on Heathers. The sheet music we're delivering by a digital distribution method, which is different than basically anybody else that's out there. To some extent, it's similar to music notes, but we actually bury a code in it so that people cannot, if people were to somehow download a copy, and let me take that back, because we actually don't allow them to download it. It's a viewable sheet music, which they can, we control the number of prints they can have. They can print one copy from it. But should they take that copy and scan it and try to sell it or make it available on the internet, we know who's done it. So there's we're very conscious of protecting our playwrights. We're very big on anti-piracy. We have a white paper we put out called Owning Their Words, which basically talks about, how playwrights and composers and lyricists make their living at it. I think people feel like they can download a song or a movie and go, who are they hurting? They're hurting Warner Brothers. They're hurting, Universal. They can afford it. They're a big company. But Samuel French is just the agent for the authors. We take a 10% commission on a professional license and a 20% commission on an amateur license, which is standard across the industry. But the 80 or 90% goes into the pocket of the playwright, who's using it to, buy groceries and to send their kids to college. And so when they're stealing a playwright's sheet music, or they're bootlegging their play, or they're doing a performance of it without paying for it, they're taking the bread out of the mouth of the playwright. And so we're very big on playwrights' rights, on enforcement and compliance. We've had a few issues this year where people are taking our authors' plays and changing them.
Yeah, you guys have been in the news a few times over the past
We
6
have,
months or so.
and you can't change their work. It's not right. It's not what they've worked for years to get it just the way they want it. Don't change it. If you don't want to do it the way it's written, don't produce it.
Do you find that that's happening more frequently now than it used to because of the way the world is? And
No, I think it's happening actually less now. What's happening more is that it's easier to find them because everybody's got a Facebook page and everybody's, we have Google alerts, and it's much easier to find rogue productions and illegal copies of the script and the like.
if you could get all the Broadway producers in a room, what would you say to them about licensing that they don't know or understand? Is there one thing that you would say, like, hey, guys, you need to think about this because it's going to help you down the road? What a lot of people forget is that shows can get to recoupment based on licensing. We all talk about recouping and what recoups here, and that a show will announce if it did or not. Interestingly enough, this industry, we don't announce 5 years after a show has closed. If it's recouped in licensing, that doesn't pop up on Playbill.com.
Right.
But it happens.
Or even on the tours, you're usually not hearing about it.
Right.
It's only whether it's recouped on Broadway.
So is there any lesson in licensing that you could teach the producers that they should know, things that I should know that I don't?
Well, every show is different. School of Rock now has released high school productions while it's running on Broadway. I think that's a very brave move and very smart. Some shows benefit from it. Some shows maybe don't. Maybe, the old-fashioned producer wants to keep all those things close to the vet. They don't want any competition. When they go to, Milwaukee, they want to make sure that no one's ever seen this play before. Sometimes that might be a good strategy, but there are other times where all those kids that have just done that show are going to get themselves and their parents, and they're going to go see the real show, see how it's really done. And I'm sure that's what's going to happen with School of Rock. We see a little bit of that happen with Chicago, which is our show, where people will go to the tour because they've done the show themselves. It's interesting. We were talking about this before. I heard someone talk about baseball, why baseball is so lasts year after year, generation after generation. It's because when you're a kid, you throw and you catch the ball, whether it's with your dad or with your friends. You have that experience of throwing the ball and catching the ball and throwing the ball and catching the ball and hitting the ball, so that when you go to a game, you can put yourselves in the shoes of the batter, of the fielder. You have that experience. You know what that feels like to do that. And so the more that we have kids in shows, seeing shows, being in shows, whatever, when they go to the theater as an adult, they get it. They understand it. They're part of it, And so I think it's very important to foster that.
Yeah, I just saw a student production of Les Mis in New Jersey and a week or so ago, and blogged about how in the old days that probably wouldn't have been allowed to happen while the Broadway production is still running right now. And I found that seeing it made me want to go see the show again, never mind all the kids that, as you so smartly put, would probably want to run across the river to see that show. So I do think that's something that's changing in terms of us producers having to loosen those licenses up a little bit earlier.
Right.
What about logos and materials? Is this something that you guys are getting into now? Typical, if I think, and I often do, as my shows like a franchise, when I do them across the country, I like them all to look the same way. But we also know that high schools like to design their own things. Do you give people opportunities? What do you find when it comes to art?
We provide the logos when we have them. And sometimes... most of the times we can get the Broadway, off-Broadway artwork. Sometimes we can't. Sometimes we'll create our own logo if we can't, with the approval of the authors. Sometimes the Broadway producer doesn't want us to use their logo and wants us to use some other logo. And sometimes the theater just wants to create their own. We don't demand that they use the logo. But actually, if an author insisted on it, we would make it part of the deal. The authors own a copyright in their work. And because they own a copyright in their work, they get to make decisions about it. They can decide who they want to do it, who they don't want to do it, whether they want to issue a license or not issue a license. And if they do issue a license, if they want to put restrictions on that license as to you have to use the logo or you can't change the race of the character or whatever those restrictions are, that's their right to do. And so we back up our playwrights on that.
What do you think is next for the licensing world? What do you see in the future in 10 years?
I think the fact that this is not really answering your question, but the fact that it is a primitive art form, that does not rely on technology, that's basically comes from, people sitting around the campfire telling stories. There's something about telling stories in the dark with other people that transcends that. So I think there's a place for movies. I'm not sure. I know you're interested in presenting stage plays live on film or video. I'm not sure if that would help or hurt our business, and I'm not sure how well it translates. There used to be this old saying, this old thing in the theater, which is, show me a videotape of your show. And you go, theater doesn't look good on video, whatever. No, I'm a professional. I can tell. Just send me the video. And then you get the video and you go, this is terrible. This looks terrible because it's hard to translate it. So if you're shooting it live, I guess like 3-camera, like a TV show, okay, I could see that. Also, it's a longer form and it's not like a sitcom. And so to hold an audience's attention, there's something about it being live in the space that you've bought into it. You're there. It's like if I go to a class and I'm in the classroom, I get so much more out of it than if I'm trying to take a class on my computer, whatever, because the phone rang. I'm interested over this. Something happened over there. Oh, look what's happening outside. I'm distracted. When I'm in the classroom with other students, I'm focused. And I think there's something about being in the theater that makes that happen. Even in a movie, you're with other people in the dark. When you're doing Daddy Long Legs, is that delivered to the homes or is that delivered to theaters?
We delivered it to wherever they could access the web.
And what was your feedback on it?
150,000 people in 135 countries tuned in.
Did they watch the whole play?
Did all of them? No, I think you're absolutely right. I think when you're experiencing something online, we live in a world now where people watch on 2-3 screens sometimes. Mm-hmm. Everything I watch, I've got my laptop in front of me and my phone next to me.
And people walk out of the theater too.
Yeah, for sure. Or fall asleep, God knows. Never happened to me, though.
No, not me either.
Okay, so my last question, my genie question. I want you to imagine that the genie from Aladdin comes to see you and thanks you for being the advocate of the playwright and says, because of all the work that you've done, I want to grant you one wish. What's the one thing that drives you so crazy about Broadway, that makes you stay up at night, that gets you angry, that you would wish that this genie would change with a snap of a finger?
Well, my wish is that playwrights could make more money, that playwrights would make a living in the theater. We all read Todd London's book, Outrageous Fortune, and the average playwright makes, I think, between $29,000 and $39,000 a year, and only half of that from playwriting. Actually, only half of that from writing, because some of them are writing other things. And of that half, only, I think, 15% is from playwriting. So playwrights have a really hard go. And I think unless we find a way for them to make more money and protect their rights, I think it's going to be, you're going to have less people writing for the theater. And the less people writing for the theater, the less chance of having that next great American play. One of the things we're working on is a thing called Playwrights Welcome, where we're asking theaters all over the country to allow playwrights to come into the theater when they have unsold tickets. Right before the show, if there are unsold tickets, let a playwright, a Dramatists Guild member, show their card, come in, see a play, learn from other playwrights, learn from the director and the designers. Oh, that's possible. I didn't know I could do that in the theater. Because we need to grow this environment and we need to keep playwrights involved. So I think producers, I think it's incumbent upon producers and regional theaters to respect the fact that playwrights have spent a really long time writing this. A lot of times they're going out to that regional theater on their own dime to attend rehearsals or to go to opening. We need to make sure they're making a living. And so I think it's on both sides of the issue. One is, making sure they're getting paid a decent royalty. They're not getting a salary. A director can go direct 3 plays a year and make a salary and get health benefits. Actors can do the same. A playwright owns his work, yes, but is not getting health benefits, is not getting a salary, is dependent on a royalty. And everybody wants a piece of that royalty. The director, says, well, I want a piece of it. And there's a royalty pool. The producer wants to say, hey, we should all share in this royalty. And then on the back end, subsidiary rights. The authors made this deal, 100 years ago, that said, oh, we'll own our work instead of, like a screenwriter where we sold it to the producer. We'll own our work. And the producer said, yeah, you can own it, but we're going to take 40% of all the future income from it. And it's not all the future income, and it's not always 40%, but it's a large piece. And, the playwrights that are, the multi-million-dollar earning playwrights. I know he did Godspell, Stephen Schwartz. God bless him. He's making a very nice living, and so is everybody else involved with him. But the average playwright is not making that living, and now 40% of his play or her play is going somewhere else. And so I think we need to pay attention to that. I know it may not be popular with producers, and I know you are the producer's perspective. I understand that, and I know listen, I've been a producer. I know the producer is adding value to the production. But for the producer's play, would this play even be earning that money? I know all the logic about it, and yet I still feel that I'm compelled to say it needs to be looked at again.
I love your passion for the playwright. And actually, I would not disagree with you. I would love them. I would actually say that I could agree to give up that 40% faster, because we don't get it forever. We get it for a period of time that we negotiate, right? Sometimes 30%, whatever. I would give that up faster as long as my show had recouped and gotten its money back with some profit to the investors. So I would be happy to shorten the life if I got more of it fast, because all that I care about, and I think most producers, we're not in this to get rich. Playwrights aren't even in it to get rich.
Right.
But in order for them to keep writing, they got to get paid more. In order for me to keep producing, I have to earn a living. But Absolutely. More importantly than me, frankly, is the investors have to keep getting their money back, or they'll just stop doing it. So there's a balance there, hopefully, somewhere that someone will figure out and break these archaic rules.
I think there's a nice, when you're raising money, and we've both raised money, and you want to tell the investor that not only are you going to get money from Broadway, but, maybe there'll be a movie, and maybe there'll be a TV series, and you know what? We'll make money from stock and amateur for the next 20 years and whatever. It's all good part of the sale. But I wonder if that investor would still invest if all they were getting was the Broadway and the tours and maybe a smaller share of that piece. I don't know that's really the hook that's getting them. I know that's what we say, but I don't know that it's really. Well,
investors, true. If you're listening out there, chime in the comments. Let us know what you think. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today, Bruce.
Thank you, Ken. This was great.
And had a lot of fun. And next up on the podcast, speaking of one of those successful writers out there, we're going to have Stephen Flaherty joining us. composer of Ragtime, Seussical, and a whole lot more. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.